Now.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. And I am so delighted to welcome you to our last Community Research Academy session for this series. I know there's been a lot of bumps in the road, but we have come to the end of an exciting, interesting, and informative program. And I'm so delighted to have you with us. And today we have a great speaker, Dr. Michael Bales. He is the Director of Evaluation at Weill Cornell's Clinical and Translational Science Center. He applies a variety of methods, including social network analysis, natural language processing, and data visualization to research impact assessments. He's a certified de-identification professional. He developed policies and procedures for Weill Cornell's Data Core, a secure, scalable computing and storage environment that allows researchers to work with data while meeting appropriate regulatory requirements for data protection. He has contributed to several open source software initiatives, including the research profiling system Vivo and the author name disambiguation system. I want to let you know that Dr. Bales obtained his PhD in biomedical informatics at Columbia University, his master's in public health and epidemiology at the University of Minnesota, and completed a public health informatics fellowship at the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention. He teaches the course, Science of Team Science, Practical Approaches to Working Effectively in Scientific Teams. I'm no longer going to keep you from hearing Dr. Bales. The next voice that you will hear will be Dr. Michael Bales, and he's going to discuss the science of team science. So here he is. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lula May, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you for inviting me back to speak. Today's session is on Science of Team Science, which is a scientific discipline that studies collaboration in science and how to collaborate more effectively. And I've been teaching a class on this topic, as Lula May mentioned, with the Weill Cornell CTSC for the last 5 years. So I'll start by providing you with an overview of team science as I've been teaching it to researchers. And the main focus of the field has really been on how researchers can collaborate more effectively. But the field of science of team science is in transition. The pandemic has made it very clear that there are serious health inequities that need to be addressed. Meanwhile, there's been a cultural reckoning on racial injustice that has renewed conversations about serious problems historically, as well as nowadays in the relationship between science and communities, particularly in communities of color. So I'm going to leave plenty of time for us to have a discussion on the biggest challenges in community-based participatory research and opportunities for the future. And I'll also describe some resources where you can learn more about the topic. So this is my second time covering this topic in the context of community research. So this is a good opportunity for peer learning where we're all learning from one another. Go off the slide for a moment just to talk with you. The term Science of Team Science was first introduced in 2006 at a conference hosted by the National Cancer Institute. The conference was the Science of Team Science, Assessing the Value of Transdisciplinary Research. And the field of Science of Team Science is informed by several academic fields, including organizational science, community health promotion, and social psychology, as well as from groups outside academia, including business and the military. So team science essentially is scientific collaboration, research conducted by more than one person in an interdependent fashion. And this includes research conducted by teams and larger groups. So this is a chart that shows that science is becoming more team-based, at least when it comes to author articles that are published in the scientific literature. So on the y-axis here, we have percentage of published articles authored by more than one individual. And if we look at the top line, which is science and engineering, we can see that around 1959, little over half of articles were published by more than one individual. And that went way up over time to 2013, when you have about 9 out of 10 that were authored by more than one individual. Another way of looking at this, here we have each line representing a given team size of papers. So articles with 1 author, with 2 authors, and 3 authors. If we look at and how that's changed over time, you'll notice that all of these are going up over time, and that reflects the fact that the number of articles published overall in science has been increasing dramatically. But if we look at these 2 lower lines, I think they're particularly interesting. This one is articles that have 101 to 1,000 authors. That was unheard of essentially before around 1980. And then our articles that have more than 1,000 articles, which didn't start appearing until around 2005. And I'm going to open it up for discussion at several points today, and this is the first time. So I'd like to invite any of you who might have an idea on what do you think the field or fields are of these authors that have, of these articles that have more than 1,000 authors. Does anyone care to comment or on what some of these fields might be? Give a little extra time. I know we have a small group, so if anyone wants to be the first person to hazard a guess as to what kinds of fields might have so many authors.
You can also write in the chat if you feel shy today.
Yeah.
But I could start and take in a wild guess about medicine.
Uh-huh.
So like any research on because I'm imagining like if you have more than 100 authors, you know, imagine just 100 doctors collaborating on different ideas on how to better technique for something.
Right, like
sure.
a summary paper of best practices in a given field might have more than 100 authors, right?
I would say technology, because technology is continuously evolving and changing daily. So I would think a lot of authors are writing engineering stuff related to technology.
Yes, in fact, right. So cosmology and things that involve sophisticated and expensive scientific instruments like telescopes and high energy physics type things, those are some of the papers that have more than 1,000 authors, certainly, right? All right, so an important concept in science of team science is interdisciplinarity. And I think that this is this is a slide that talks about levels of cross-disciplinary integration, ranging from unidisciplinary to transdisciplinary. So I'll start by describing unidisciplinary research. This is just research teams where you have everyone working within a single discipline. For example, a team of dermatologists working together, publishing research related to the skin. Then you have multidisciplinary research where you might have people from different disciplines working together, that each drawing on their own disciplinary knowledge. For example, you were studying how some animals are moving across a desert environment, and you have a zoologist and you have a climate scientist, and they're all working together. So what do you think the next level here is interdisciplinary research as opposed to multidisciplinary? Does anyone have an idea of what might be the next level beyond people working within their individual disciplines?
I'm trying to think inter and intra, but I'm thinking right now it's all working together, they're all from the same discipline.
Right. So interdisciplinary is also people working from different disciplines, but they're using a synthesis of approaches. So they're taking knowledge and methods from different disciplines and synthesizing them a little bit more, rather than just having their own individual view and collaborating together. And then how about transdisciplinary? This is one of the more challenging ones to understand. I'll go to a slide that describes these a little bit. So transdisciplinary research is about creating a unity of intellectual frameworks beyond the disciplinary perspectives. So for an example here, you might have a team of agricultural economists and hydrologists working together to solve an agricultural problem, or research on effective information systems for biomedical research, which is biomedical informatics, one of the fields that I've studied. So transdisciplinarity, as distinguished from multidisciplinarity and interdisciplinarity, requires that researchers reinvent or invent new science together by exploring research questions at the intersection of their respective fields. So they're conducting joint research projects and developing methods that can be used to reintegrate knowledge. So transdisciplinarity promotes theoretical, conceptual, and methodological reorientation with respect to the core concepts of the participating disciplines. Now,
can you give an example? Excuse me, can you give an example of what that looks like?
sure.
Those merging of emerging ideas?
Well, I mentioned biomedical informatics, which has to do with how do you create systems that can be used in clinical environments. For example, like let's say at a pharmacy, you have a system that's going to raise a red flag if there's a patient is taking a medicine that's going to interact with something that they're already taking. Well, to do that properly, you have to have different points of view that are integrated to create a system, an information system in this case, that is effective. So you might want to have cognitive scientists, and you might want to have clinicians who understand, pharmacists who understand what these interactions are, and information scientists who know how to create apps. And they all have to speak with one another about sophisticated ideas and how the methods that they use can integrate to create this effective information system. That's one example.
Thank you.
Sure. So let's talk about challenges in multidisciplinary research. And again, I'd like to encourage conversation with you here. What are some challenges that might arise when collaborators are from different disciplines?
People can be headstrong and really focus on their perspective and not be as open to discuss other points of view because of what their training and their experience and their belief system sometimes makes it not easy to collaborate.
Yes, that's a thing that can commonly occur, definitely.
Mhm.
Any other ideas?
This is Lula May. Sometimes people are really tied to their own language in their own discipline. So sometimes they don't hear very well, or they may have difficulty making the transition from one discipline and understanding another one.
Yes, indeed, that's right. And the openness or being open to incorporating other ideas is actually a kind of a personality trait that predicts more success for multidisciplinary research. It's one of the biggest ones.
What about who's funding it? And interruptions from them, funders.
Oh, are you saying, for example, like if you had a funding coming from the National Institute of Aging, and then there are a bunch of other researchers, but the people who are the aging researchers would be the ones that have kind of more power or control or
Yes.
access to the funds? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's another thing that can happen, right? That can be a challenge as well, sure.
It's like you take your ball with you. You don't want to play.
They might not want to share data. They might be protective of their data. Yeah, certainly. Anyone else want to comment on this?
Well, this looks like a nucleus, this diagram. You know, looks like it's not Legos, but it looks like it's a chain, nuclei chain. So, you know, you always, you know, there are things that can go wrong with that. Something can be contaminated to contaminate or pollute the chain.
Yes, you can have conflict. A conflict can occur, and that's natural in collaboration. So, you know, one strategy is to allow conflict to happen, and then even embrace conflict in some cases. But you don't want to have the kind of conflict that can cause there's a difference between intellectual conflicts or scientific debates and then interpersonal conflicts. And when those start to emerge, it's important for example, a team leader to step in and try to have a discussion with the people involved.
My name is Deborah. I'm not sure if it's your material that Agnes submitted to us, but one of them was about collaboration. And there were some questions to ask prior to getting to this chain, I guess. And if you ask those questions and try to build this network, this might be a successful project. This chain may be strong enough to continue till its end goal.
Yes,
But that takes some preparation.
I think you're referring to the collaboration plan document.
Yes, I like that.
I do too. Yeah. Have any of you been on a project that's involved a collaboration plan in the past? I have. They're not that common. They're becoming more common though, I think. And a collaboration plan I think can be particularly important in community-based research. To set the expectations early on.
Hi, this is Felix Rojas. In listening to the research, I was just thinking in terms of cultural and religious, how come together, like in a research perspective. When I say culture, because as we know, we can be professionals for the other countries, or we might not get together in the idea of our research. Or what about religious? I don't want to this thing one thing one another, but
well, it can be more difficult to trust people that you perceive as different, right? So a concept and this diagram on the screen is really from my work with social network analysis. An important principle there is homophily, which is the idea that birds of a feather flock together. So it's common for people who come from the same background, from the same regional background, from the same country, even in academic institutions, to collaborate with one another. So
Sorry, Michael, I had muted you by accident.
Yeah. We can
Oh, you're still unmuted. I mean, you're still muted, Michael.
Oh, okay. No worries. What was the last thing you heard me say?
I think it was a couple sentences. If anybody can.
Did I start answering the question about religion?
No, I don't.
Okay, I can go into that again. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Start over.
Oh, sure. So this is a social network diagram on the screen here. This comes from my work with social networks. And an important concept is homophily, which is birds of a feather flock together. And so people tend to like to work with people that they think share common values or are like them in some way. That's a natural way that people tend to interact. It's just, and so you might have people who are less willing to trust other people who they perceive as different from a different country, from a different religion, so on. And just having an awareness of that is important for effective collaboration. But I know that even at individual academic institutions, you might have teams of people from a given country who maybe they were collaborating in the past and moved to another institution. For whatever reason, they maybe feel more comfortable and they'll form research groups, which is fine. So I think it can be problematic if there are issues of mistrust that are misplaced or misguided in a research collaboration that are related to things like religion or perceptions of people's motivations that derive from differing religious beliefs, for example. That's one answer. I mean, I'd welcome any other comments if anyone else has other ideas about that, certainly too. All right. So we were talking about challenges in multidisciplinary research, and I think we've really covered it pretty well. So you have different scientific cultures and research paradigms, methodologies, social norms, and these can be difficult to integrate. And so you have less common ground to support seamless communication. And as a result, collaboration may be more difficult to establish and to maintain. And as I was just talking about, you can have conflict that can emerge from these divergent worldviews, disciplinary worldviews. And so And biomedical research can be competitive, as was pointed out, and it can be, researchers can be less willing to share their data, for example, and to trust one another in multidisciplinary research. So
Excuse
how,
me.
yes,
So I'm looking, transdisciplinary would not necessarily benefit particular communities if they're talking about food, lack of food, looking at a community that's suffering from, malnutrition or whatever. The multidisciplinary team is more appropriate for that, right?
oh boy, I'm not sure. Well, transdisciplinary, on the slide that I showed you, it's in the science of team science, it represents the farthest along or the most advanced level of disciplinary integration. So I would think that the consensus in science of team science would be that a transdisciplinary team would be even better than a multidisciplinary team, because the methods are more integrated, and there's more of a awareness of where the other disciplines are coming from. So even for a problem like how to address complicated problems of why is there hunger in a given community, transdisciplinary approach is important. But we're going to talk a little bit later about in more detail about community partnered participatory research and specific challenges, which I think may even be more important than whether you have a transdisciplinary team.
Okay.
Okay. So my question now about this is, we talked about some of the challenges of multidisciplinary research. How can some of these challenges be addressed, or how can they be dealt with in scientific teams if you have people from different disciplines?
With the skillfulness that Mr. Williams referred to in terms of chair and co-chair, the skillfulness of people, of interacting with people, help in terms of moderating some of the tensions or disconnects. In other words, the chair has to be skillful.
Exactly. Yep. That's one of the ones. That's one of the points I was going to bring up. Strong leadership, skilled leadership, which has a lot to do with communication and how to deal with conflict, how to present a shared vision for the project, leverage different people's skills, and so that they can bring what they have to the table. Exactly. All those kinds of things. Good leadership.
This is Lula May. I think also that the shared leadership, whoever the leader, cannot be intimidated about sharing, because sometimes people are, when they're used to being in charge, they are intimidated by other groups of people, and they don't want to share that leadership, and it becomes an ongoing tension. I think if there's two groups and both of them have to come to a general consensus about the end goal, and even though they may disagree on what the end goal happens to be, they have to agree to disagree.
Sure.
And I think in their agreeing to disagree, or then they may have to let go. Let's say I may give up certain things because this is what I want, whereas
Certainly.
you may want those things. So I can say, okay, you can have those things, but I want this. And I think that's like sharing the leadership without being intimidated over the end goal.
Definitely. And it can be helpful, again, to lay the foundation for the research project by creating a collaboration plan at the start.
Yes, I got to write creating collaboration plan. Yes, yes.
And right, and that doesn't have to be something that's set in stone. It can be an initial document that can be subject to change, but getting people on the page at the beginning is very, very helpful, especially for interdisciplinary research.
Yes. And I think especially for community-based, yes, definitely.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Okay, and what about remote collaboration? So this is also a theme that's been covered quite a bit in science of team science. And of course, many of us have been learning firsthand during the pandemic about challenges that arise when you're working remotely. So I'd like to invite your comments again here. What types of challenges come up when scientists are trying to get work done on projects and don't have the benefit of seeing their collaborators much in person. So what challenges?
Well, the first thing I'm going to talk about is technology, because you got WebEx, you got Google this, you got all these different systems, and some people are more comfortable one over the other. Some of them don't really integrate well. So I would say before you start talking about remote collaboration, hopefully there's a unified or agreeable mechanism for communication.
Definitely. Right. The technology and the network behind all of the technology, and just technology readiness. Are the people who are involved in the collaboration have what they need? Do they have the experience needed to operate these things? Right. They maybe they need training in certain cases, for example. Yeah.
I'm just gonna mention in the comment, Brianna said, I don't know if you saw it or.
Oh,
if
I
it was
see that there's a
mentioned.
chat. I'm sorry.
Yeah, she said that transparency I find is really important in research. So how can that be achieved with multidisciplinary research if we cannot trust, in quotes, others with it?
Transparency. Yeah, I think that, right, it's difficult. And I think that's part of science of team science, which I find is so fascinating and so eye-opening, is that it gives you an awareness of the social ecology perspective. That is, how do different people interact, and just getting to know what our own thoughts are about working with others, and understanding what others' thoughts may be about working with us is it's like a different way of thinking. It's sort of a more holistic way of thinking about it. So I think that can help to build trust. And there are these practical approaches that I teach in my course about specific things you can do to learn more about yourself. So my students go through some of those things, and then talking about a collaboration plan and other things like that. But I mean, trust is difficult to establish and maintain, especially in transdisciplinary research. So I think that one practical approach, and since we're on
May I
remote
speak on that?
Oh yeah,
Excuse me.
certainly.
To piggyback off what Ms. Gita says, in terms of, I look at trust as something different, that I trust your methodology, that without seeing how you do things, I may not trust that the process is legitimate or valid. It's like how you make potato salad and how I make it. I need to trust that you put mustard in it, that you put relish, you added onion powder, that I need to know that's how you do it, because that's in my mind, how you make potato salad. And you may put
Right.
peas and carrots in it. It's like, nope, that just polluted it. That's not how you do it. That's not my process. So remote is that we're used to seeing hands-on and eyeballing the project most of the time if we're not communicating. We're usually communicating with one other person, not in isolation as we're doing with remote.
Totally. And I think that having those kinds of conversations can be really helpful face-to-face, which is another challenge in the pandemic. Because we're discouraged from face-to-face communication, just from the social distancing and all of that. So, but the literature on team science does say that it's important, when possible, even if people are working in different cities, to have an initial meeting where you meet face-to-face, because that can be so important for building that initial trust. And then if you can, have additional face-to-face meetings throughout the year. Now, the technology to support remote collaboration is getting better and better. So some of these issues are getting a little bit less important, arguably, but still the research is that face-to-face communication is quite important. So
Felix Rojas here again. I was just thinking in how it becomes competitive. Like when we have remote collaboration, we might think like, not only because being remote, that means that it might be a type of how competitive we are. Like, let's say, like a research in between, collaboration between China, Russia, and the United States.
yeah.
As we know, the other countries that like to go in terms of technology, that sometimes it seems like way ahead of us. Instead, in this case of China, I'm gonna just say the name. When it is competitive in a way, like who's gonna benefit? Like Is it the research, the researcher, or the outcome of the research?
Yeah, that's a difficult question.
Mhm.
And that covers a lot. You're talking about international collaboration. I mean, you can
Yes.
even have geopolitical dynamics there
Yes.
too, right? So, and it's more difficult to trust perhaps people from countries that are considered adversaries for some people. I mean, there's also, you know, the difference between trusting the government versus trusting the individuals that you're working with. But
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know. There's no easy answer there, I think.
Right.
This is Miss Herbert. I have a question. I don't know if I fully understand what this whole process is about, but I'm looking at community collaboration.
Okay.
If you're getting together in a research project and you have a goal, a plan, then wouldn't you all get together to have the same long range plan to come to the same conclusion? In that we're working towards a conclusion?
Right. I think you're bringing up a great point that I think is good for us to transition to something that I wanted to talk about with regard to community partnered research. Because if you allow me to give a little more background on that, then we can come back to your question, if it's all right. But let me just give you one definition of community partnered research: an approach to research that involves collective, reflective, and systematic inquiry in which researchers and community stakeholders engage as equal partners in all steps of the research process with the goals of educating, improving practice, or bringing about social change. So a key thing that I just said is that researchers and community stakeholders engage as equal partners in all steps of the research process. So an initial meeting where you come together, you know, to talk about a community partnered research project, there are important things that need to be discussed. So I think that what I had intended to do was have a discussion and then talk about some of the solutions. So if it's all right, why don't we talk about some of the challenges of community partnered research first, and then we'll talk about what can be done to build and maintain trust. So what do you see as some of the biggest challenges for effective collaboration in community-based research?
I think someone said it in terms of goals.
Yeah.
Having the same goals. As an example, something's about to happen in my community, and I had initiated a conversation and generated a document, and it turned out that the person had a different goal than I. We understood the larger picture, but let's just say this person wanted to start a block association, and I wanted to start a coalition, which are two different goals, two different purposes. Later on, we could collaborate with the block association, but I felt the coalition, but this is our first and initial meeting. And as we talked about it, we kind of agreed that, yeah, this should be the first step. And then we can do this as a secondary step. But we didn't really know we knew there was a situation that needed to be addressed, but we approached it from different angles because everyone is a stakeholder in its own right with different needs.
Totally.
So when you come together to collaborate and become a partnership, you got to talk it out to come to that one first prioritize.
That's right. And that's so important. And actually, last time I taught this in April, I gave this seminar in April. I remember Lula May emphasized how important it is for everyone to convene at the start of the project and to get everyone on the same page. And that's a great example of a case where that happened for you. So what are some other challenges that you see with community partnered research?
This is Lola May again. I think one of the things is that all partners have to leave their egos at the door.
Yeah.
And they really, they have to be very fluid. One of the things that I am adamant about is that if the community or if two people are going to be in partnership, they have to be able to speak the same language. And I think when you come to community-based participatory research and you have community partners with academics or community partners with organizations or two community groups coming into a partnership. I think just or like Dr. Hicks just said, people have to hear, they have to voice their concerns, hear what's being said, and then come up with goals that support both individuals. And I think they have to learn each other's language. I think it's so important to learn the language, learn the key words, learn what each group thinks is vital. It's like sometimes people talk about the birds, they talk about waterways, but some people are more interested in the algae in the water than they are the birds around the water. Some people are more interested in the birds, and I think there has to be a consensus. They have to sit and they have to really, really hammer out the details. Because if you're going to be an equal partnership and equal responsibility, then each group needs to know what that responsibility includes.
Right. That's so important. Any other thoughts on, well, how about what can be other things that we can do, in community partnered research to try to achieve more successful outcomes?
Ensure that people are felt welcome and validated of the contributions that they make. Making sure that you unpack some of the language so people can make sure, pay attention to the environment so you can make sure people are informed and able to fully participate as much as possible.
Definitely. And yeah, so let's say as community members, what kinds of conversations would you like to have with the researchers at the start of a project about what your role will be? I guess what I'm getting at here is, Lula May, again, last time I taught this in April, you made such a great point about ensuring that community partners are included in decisions related to the research design, or you talked about funding, writing them into the grant, making sure that these decisions about the bulk budget allocation are agreed upon in a fair way by all parties involved. And you also talked about how decisions about where things should be published can be shared among community members, right? And I totally agree with all of that. And I don't think that's done everywhere. In fact, it's probably just a conversation that's in the earlier stages nationwide. And researchers and community members or public health practitioners in the community may have different motivations. And that's a challenging thing to deal with. Public health practitioners, community-based community health practitioners may have more pragmatic goals. They may be more community-oriented. They're disposed to more quick decision-making, and they want to implement problem-solving strategies. But researchers may have a little more long-term orientation, may be more concerned with basic research questions, and they're interested in publication and receipt of grant funds. So these different motivations can lead to conflicts. I think that scientific community has recognized in universities that these, for example, the way that people are assigned recognition and credit for promotion and tenure doesn't necessarily favor team-based research, doesn't necessarily favor community-based research. I think that's starting to change. I have some reason to be optimistic. And I think that will go a long way towards advancing
if I'm correct, if you go back to where you was at, it's always about what's in it for me in basic economics, what's in it for me, and then also how we're going to return the findings where people can benefit from all of the labor work and so on and so forth. How are we going to be able to see it manifest in our communities and things of that nature?
Definitely.
This is Lula May. That's one of the reasons why I think it's so important for community people to take this course so that their eyes will become open to elements in research. So they'll be able to, they won't be intimidated by the language of researchers. I think that is so critical, because if they're going to be able, they have to be able to speak up and talk about funding sources. They have to be able to talk the language. And we should also be cognizant of the fact that researchers, they should also be taught the importance of community. They do know that community members are important because that's where they want to do their research and that's why they're getting the money. But they also have to realize they can't do helicopter research. They just can't just sort of drop in and drop out. That they have to make long-term commitments to people in the community and to their needs. And once they do that, the community people, if the researchers are really real and sincere about their health, the community's health issues, and if they're listening, I think that will work for the community and the researcher as well, because they'll be able to do additional projects. They won't just do one project and make big headlines and walk away. I think that's part of the reason that right now we have such a trust issue with vaccine. And I think it's from being historically undermined by researchers. That's why every person who's on this line today will walk away knowing more about research, and they'll be able to voice their opinion without thinking that they don't know, because they do know, and they've learned so much from the course and so much from you as well. And I think that's crucial.
Because Lulu May, as we were speaking last week, that research should be across the board. It should not be just one set of people involved in the research.
Exactly.
It should be across the board, include everyone in the community.
In the community, but we have to prepare the community to be included, because sometimes when you have not been included, you get used to not being included and you accept it and you say, oh, they're not going to listen to me anyway. Not true. You have to step up to the plate.
And that's where the trust plays an important role.
Yes.
Well, I had an experience, and I am experiencing something. This after getting the booster shot, when I got my second vaccine, I was approached about if I wanted to have my pressure monitored, and I asked by whom. They told me the agency, medical, so I'm sure there was some research done before they began this project of reaching out and letting people, and it's not with my PCPs, it's a separate entity monitoring my pressure. But one of the questions I asked today, as a result, I wanted to tout your horn, was that, what are you going to do with the data? And the woman said, pardon me? I said, the data, you're collecting data. What are you going to do with the data? She says, well, we have our MP will store it. I'm like, and then do what? She says, well, we'll have it on file. So just from being in this experience for the past, 8 weeks or 6 weeks, I'm not counting. My questioning has become different in that now I'm like, good. You're doing a service for a community. Apparently you've done some research. There is a need to monitor of hypertension and diabetes, et cetera, et cetera. But my thing now is you're giving me a service, but now what are you going to do with the data that you collect on me?
Yeah. That's a very good point.
And every now and then I stop them little research ambulance chasers in the lobby and I ask them various questions there, and they all look dumbfounded. All they know is they're there with a piece of paper trying to sign somebody up for something. They ain't got no question when I say, what's the IRB, who's on it, whatever. All of them look retarded to me. And it's sad. And I'm going to continue to investigate. And I think that they shouldn't have people out there, if you want to call them research assistants, that are not informed.
Good, because they're going back to their research directors and saying, listen, I just spoke with someone. This is what happened, right?
Right. So and I was getting very close to participating in one. And once again, when I asked a couple of questions, number one, like I tell everybody with me, anything in life that I sign, I need to have a full copy a day prior at least, so I can review and highlight on my own. Mm-hmm. Other than that, we can't have a conversation about buying a car or buying nothing without me having that documentation. Well, that right there threw them for a loop. Then when I asked some pointing questions, I don't know, the lady just got lost and eventually said she couldn't answer my question. We couldn't continue to have a conversation. But it really bothers me to see people in the lobby doing good quality work with a good quality goal, but you're sending people out there that's not you, but I'm saying you're sending people out there that's uninformed, and can't answer no questions, have no clue. All they understand the paper that they're trying to deal with and the list that they're trying to bring back to whomever. So I always say that too. Then you're also getting that quality people because they don't even know what they're doing. I don't know. This.
Well, you know something, don't blame it on the people. It's a system problem. It's
Yes,
not
yes.
the people.
Yes, yes.
So now.
But I mean, if I ask you a question and you look in the sky.
Yeah, but you don't blame, you know what?
Yes, ma'am.
It's like when Dr. Hicks was just asking her primary care provider, the person that was doing the blood pressures and all of this, we take it for granted that that person was informed.
Mm-hmm.
But if no one, it's like going to the bus or getting on a bus. If no one ever asks, where's this bus going? And everybody takes it for granted. It's going downtown, it's going downtown. And there's no label on it, but the bus goes downtown. So everybody says it goes downtown. The day that the bus isn't going downtown, people will get on the bus thinking it will, because they're so used to things being in a certain way.
Yes.
That's why you're here. It's not the same old anymore.
Yeah.
The community's voice is imperative, and that's you.
Thank you.
All right. I love this discussion. This is wonderful. I think I just have an hour, right? So.
Yeah, we go on till 3:30.
We're long-winded.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's just you presenting, so you can take all the time you like.
Oh, okay. So I do have more time. Good, because I wanted to show you some resources that I think are useful for learning more about science of team science. Starting with this one, the Science of Team Science learning modules, online modules at teamscience.net. And this is what it looks like. There are a number of modules you can go through that take several hours for learning about team science. And I want to give credit to Holly Falk-Krasinski, who was very instrumental in putting all of this together. And this is a team science toolkit out of the Georgia Clinical and Translational Science Alliance that has things like online learning tools, covering strategies for interdisciplinary work, team building exercises, and conflict resolution. And this is a good book for understanding team-based science called Enhancing the Effectiveness of Team Science. And it's mainly, though, about how universities and research institutions can support teams. Now, if we have more time until 3:30, I mean, we could continue our conversation about community partnered research. I think it's very fruitful. Lulame, do you have any thoughts on whether we should continue with that conversation? Lulame, are you still there?
Yeah, I think she's on mute, maybe.
I had a problem. I think we should continue the conversation. I think it's important.
All right. So let's see what we've covered among what I was planning to talk about. See, I felt like last year I only had an hour for this, but is it always been an hour and a half?
It has always been about an hour and 15 minutes, but sometimes we go over, sometimes we can almost go to 2 hours. So we have a little more time. Sometimes we have two speakers and that's when we run short of time, but we've learned a lot. So if you want to share something
May I
else,
share something?
go right
You
ahead.
brought up feelings. I need a therapy session. The same situation that's occurring in my neighborhood. Last Sunday, I initiated the conversation. I've created a draft, a flyer to involve my neighboring block, the block adjacent to mine, as well as the people on the block. Long story short, as I encouraged the person, we communicated back and forth, and encouraged the person to reach out to other entities, other agents, and speak because he knew blah, 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 blah. The bottom line is I got email from people thanking him for his leadership, commending him for his leadership. So we're talking about partnership. And one of the things on collaboration was that I read was discuss in advance, how do you give credit? How do you, am I correct, Mr. Bates? Dr. Bates, that it says how in collaboration decide how is credit going to be distributed? And now the conflict is, I was talking with my son, he said, yeah, Ma, I said, but you know, I'm humble to say, hey, listen, people are commending you, but you're leaving me out. Sounds egotistical, talking about leaving your ego to the side, and impractical for right now. I don't care, but it brings up feelings about partnering. I don't want credit. I don't want this monstrosity built down the street from me. But the point is, there was no need to discuss, hey, listen, when you speak to Community Board 4 or this lawyer, mention my name. But when you partner, you really need to be aware of your constituents and those on your team to include them, because you're talking about that thing I call the prototype of nuclear. You can break just by having hard feelings, because your team, your community are human beings with feelings and ego. But if you want your plan to work, you have to be mindful who's on your team, include them in, use the language of inclusiveness. And when people from outside start focusing on you, remember your team. And that team can move forward, because not everyone's a stakeholder and feels like a stakeholder when they've offered their advice or put things together. So I just had to share that as we're talking about team building and partnerships and collaboration, that here it is, I'm not part of a research, we're part of an action group. And it's still a process, the same process of building your team, whether it's for research or whether it's for action. Building your team and being inclusive of your team is very significant. And as the powers that be come in, to external powers come in, make sure your team is still with you and riding that same pony, it's going in the same direction when the questions begin, when attention is given, that you're not the one with the mic, that you're passing the mic.
I think that's well said, because, and I think it's very, very important. And I think that's where sometimes community people get upset, and there's a parting of the ways. And I think sometimes academicians are used to taking credit and not giving the community appropriate credit. That's why when you sit down and start the discussion at the very, very beginning, I think at that time when you create a collaboration, you have to include those elements in there, because I think that's important. Because
I'm sorry, go ahead.
The community's indication of success maybe when they remove the 900 fast food restaurant from from around the block, or from the third McDonald's on one block, something like that. Whereas for the academician, it will maybe weight or blood pressure or something else, but it has to be clear, and it has to be spoken, and it has to be repeated over and over and over and over again, because the more it's repeated, then it becomes more of the foundation that holds the whole group together.
One of the things I remember about 20 plus years ago, when I was working with a lot of young people, I was in the military, so it really wasn't my community. But one of the strategies when I was organizing every kind of hair show, fashion show, whatever it may be, the young people were not allowed to say that Michael was having such and such. They only were allowed to communicate, Mommy, I'm having such and such. And I made everybody feel it, belong to it, and own it by communicating, not by my organizational title, not by me, but only to say, Mommy, I'm having a fashion show. Mommy, I'm doing such and such. That was the way they had to communicate, so they can feel it, own it, and then they can really commit to it. Yes.
Wonderful. All these great points and very interesting. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that because I kind of went through the end part quickly, not realizing I had more than an hour, but I think we really covered the vast majority of what I had intended to talk about. So
can we talk about, you gave us competencies. Can you talk about those competencies?
Oh, sure. Competencies for effective participation, right?
Mm-hmm.
the thing is, I don't have them in front of me. So I have to find where they are in my.
Agnes, you have it?
Yeah, is it the materials that you sent to me, Michael?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yes, then, because I know I sent some links at the beginning when we first organized the seminar. Okay, I got it. Yep, I can share my screen. All right.
Right.
Yeah, well, when I have the class, what I do is I encourage my my students to read through this during class, and then we discuss. So I don't know if all of you have read this, but maybe we can just go through. This is based on the scientific research. In fact, there are even references from the literature, the science of team science literature, that talks about why all of these competencies are useful. And they're divided into categories. So this goes on for 3 pages. And so it looks like there are 4 categories: values, attitudes, and belief-based competencies, knowledge-based competencies, interpersonal skills-based competencies, and intrapersonal-based competencies. I believe I have a summary of that on this slide. Yeah. So this is a summary of how they're, if we group them all together, right? So starting at the upper left, this is kind of about openness, right? Which was something we spoke about: being intellectually curious, valuing interdisciplinarity, having a broad perspective, understanding other disciplines, right? And being good at networking, interdisciplinary networking. Now, remember, these are from the science of team science as it has been, as the field has developed over the last 15 years or so, without the stronger emphasis that I'm sure it's going to have in community-oriented research and getting the needs of, and getting community-based research that's done in universities better oriented with the needs of the community, right? So we're thinking about this in terms of groups of scientists in general, working at, whether it be at universities or working in the community, okay? The next category here is being knowledgeable about their own field, being capable methodologists. So that's a matter of training and being able to put your thoughts together and publish is considered important in science. So when people go through training programs like master's programs, PhD programs, they learn some of these things about how to get along as professionals. So that has to do with being knowledgeable. And then being knowledgeable about teamwork, being good at communicating, good at managing conflict. So these are more interpersonal skills. These are all based on the literature, things that are good for participating in scientific teamwork. And other personal characteristics: being flexible, open-minded, humble, understanding yourself, your own biases, which can be very difficult, and being willing to change and adapt to others. So that covers, I think, a broadly this topic, but we could probably talk about this a little bit more if anyone wants to comment.
How do you use the core competencies? I read it, but how are they used in the development of the team? Is individually, personally, looking at the team?
Well, I suppose it depends on where you're coming from. Like if you're a team leader, if you're responsible for assembling groups of people, you can use these as principles when you articulate a vision for a project. You can incorporate some of these things into your values statement or your mission. These are kind of, you can, so from a leadership point of view, I think it's good to understand what these competencies are and try to encourage the people who are your followers, if you're a leader, or the people who work with you, right, to embody these to the extent possible. And I mean, some of these things can be learned, but from a practical standpoint, I mean, this is kind of a higher level overview. So translating this into specific steps that you can take, there are, for example, personality profiles that you can take. One of them is, I can't remember now. I've taken a few of them. There are a lot of different ones, but things that help you understand what your own top strengths are, for example, and getting to know what other people around you have as their strengths.
This is Lula May. I agree. Understanding your strengths and the strengths of those around you. One of the things I like to say to community people, and that is they are more knowledgeable about their communities than anyone else around. And it's important for them to realize that they know. And the way in which they know and the way in which they understand their knowledge may be different from others at the table, but they have to always take ownership of their own knowledge of the situation and be able to articulate that and put that out as part of the language that you may have to collaborate in terms of collaboration, creating a collaboration around the knowledge that you have, the need that you see, which may be very vastly different from the needs of everyone else at the table. I think that's important. I think you just you can be open-minded and you can be aware of your own biases, but I think you also have to respect your own knowledge and own it. I think it's very important.
Definitely. Great. Anyone else have any comments on this or anything else we've talked about or want to bring up? If not, I think that covers for today.
Well, I thank you, Dr. Bales.
Thank you
Wonderful
for having me back.
information.
Thank you so much.
Oh,
Michael.
thank you so much. We got to call you back and back and back. Oh, it was great.
Thank you.
I think. Thank you again for having me.
Oh,
And
you're welcome.
Great meeting all of you as well.
Thank you for your patience.
Thank you as well.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Bales. Thank you. I can get in my notes and say, well, today I learned something.
Great. That's great to hear. Appreciate that.
This is new for me, Doc. So I really appreciate learning more about this research science, but I would like to really get more involved and to learn more about this. It seemed very interesting.
Great. Well, I feel free to reach out to us, reach out to me if you'd like, and I'd be glad to speak with any of you further about any of this, and certainly check out the resources on the last slide. That's of interest.
Well, one of the things, Dr. Bales, that I would like, and I'm going to encourage all of the participants from this class, I want them to get involved in community-based participatory research in one form or another. So what I'm going to be looking for is grants that I can send out to them, and perhaps they might be interested. And so we can go from there and see what we can do, because our future in research, a lot of it is really around community-based participatory research, and it's growing and it's needed. It's sorely needed. And so I will be sending out information over time to the participants in this class. And from there, we don't know. From there, it'll be a beginning. So I'm hoping that they will be able to follow up and ask you questions, but I hope it's like a growth, like growing flowers, flowers of research, flowers of information. So thank you so much.
Thank you again.
Okay, now for everyone who has taken the class, you will have a final exam that Agnes will be sending out to you, and you'll get a certificate of completion. And I just have a couple of questions that I will be asking. I'll be sending out like a questionnaire, and I'm going to ask you to answer those questions. Oh, and I forgot to tell everybody, have a blessed, great, wonderful holiday that's coming up.
Yeah, happy holidays, everybody. Happy holidays.
Happy holiday.
Happy holidays.
Happy New Year.
Holiday. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Same to you. Thank you all so very, very much.
Agnes, I sent you a PowerPoint. On a photo
A
voice.
photo voice?
Yes, and you can
Is
look at
that
it,
the one
Dr.
from
Phillips.
Kellogg's
from that-
Foundation?
No, it's the one where the doctor invited me to submit a PowerPoint.
Oh, yes, I didn't see it.
I sent
searched
it
my-
to Agnes today, about
okay.
an hour or so ago. And I asked her to share it with you,
Oh,
just to
okay.
get your opinion about it.
Okay.
I want feedback.
All right, I will look at it.
And then you
Thank
have to
you.
remind me of the name of the doctor who said maybe you can present it at Columbia.
Dr. Cohen,
Yes, okay.
Elizabeth Cohen.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Just look at it and give me feedback.
Okay, that I will certainly do. I thank
Mhm.
all of you again. Thank you so very much. Thank you for participating. Thank you for being students. And I just I want you to start to think about your photo novellas, your photo voice. So if you have not completed one, I'd like for you to complete one, send it to Agnes, and we'll pass it on to Dr. Elizabeth Cohen. So
Oh, and
thank you all.
thank you for inviting me to be a part of this team. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. What I'm
Thank
gonna
you.
do is I'm thinking of writing an article about the Community Research Academy. So I'm gonna
Mhm.
be sending out a little letter to everybody asking you to give me feedback on the program. And then I'm gonna have a community person look over the whole article and sign on yes, no, and stuff like that. So I will be doing that, but I'll be getting
Cool.
back to you.
Cool.
So I thank you.
All right, Dr. Phillips. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, have a blessed
Thank you,
one. everyone.
Agnes.
Thank you, everybody. It was a pleasure working with you for
Thank
this
you.
series.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Agnes. Thank you. Thank you for your time and patience with us.
No
Yes.
problem, no problem. I'm gonna be
Okay.
sending the recording and also a few questions from the last few videos.
You
All
can
right.
lose the final. You can lose the final in the internet, Evan.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
It's expelled.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Have a nice holiday. Bye.
So, bye-bye.